Hello, good afternoon, everyone. How is everyone doing? Yeah, good. All right. All right. Well, good. Excellent. Welcome. Welcome to this session, how to implement a custom configurator in Salesforce CPQ. Co-presenting with me, I have Samuel Chuck. Sam is a demonstration engineer and my partner in crime today. And I'm Erwan Kirebel, Quote-to-Cash Solutions Director within our CPQ and Billing Product Management group here at Salesforce. How many of you were in the session that Sam and I led an hour ago? Yeah, some of you. So I was talking about earlier the fact that I've been working in this space for 20 years, and I was saying how things were different back 20 years ago, and how CPQ has evolved, and the breadth of capabilities has widened significantly, and the industries that CPQ addresses are much diverse now than they were 20 years ago. But if there's one thing that didn't change is how our customers, how you guys can come up with complex requirements when it comes down to configurators, and how you guys want to push the boundaries of what CPQ can do when it comes to configuring complex products, configuring complex services. So our goal today is to give you some insights as to what are some of the tools that we have within Salesforce CPQ to extend the capabilities of Salesforce CPQ and go with more complex configuration requirements. So before we get started, I'd like to start by saying thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for attending this session today. And thank you for being trailblazers. Thank you for being Salesforce and Salesforce CPQ trailblazers. If you like to blaze trails, you are in the right session. Today you'll learn about how to blaze new trails with custom configurators. I'm sure you've never seen before this forward-looking statement. As a publicly traded company, we advise you that you should be basing your buying decisions based on capabilities that are available now and not based on roadmap promises. That being said, today we'll be talking about stuff that you guys can do right away today with Salesforce CPQ. So a few words on Salesforce CPQ and billing. As you can see on this slide, and this has changed significantly over the last 20 years, Salesforce CPQ and billing is involved into a number of steps of the quote-to-cash process within the customer lifecycle. So you will see users using CPQ to select and configure products, price a deal, generate a quote, convert a quote into a contract and/or into an order, invoice the customer, collect payments, and recognize the revenue. Today we're going to focus on the first step, which is one of the most complex steps in the CPQ process, which is configuring a deal, configuring products. And as I said earlier, our customers typically have some very complex requirements, whether they are manufacturers or forklift trucks or elevators, or whether they sell subscription-based services or credit card processing services, for example. Luckily, with Salesforce CPQ, we offer a wide variety of concepts that you guys can use in order to model complex product offerings with concepts such as guided setting, bundles, options, option constraints, product rules, price rules, all of those things that allow you guys to create complex product offerings and manage complexity in your product offering. However, our customers like to push the boundaries of what CPQ does out of the box. And some of our customers need more. They want to go beyond what's available natively with Salesforce CPQ. And I'll give you some examples here. Right? Some of our customers, they have a legacy configurator, like, for example, an SAP variant configurator that they are using successfully, and that does the job. So in this case, there are a couple options. Right? We could either convert those models into a Salesforce CPQ model so that salespeople using Salesforce CPQ can also use the same logic and the same models within Salesforce CPQ. But the downside of that is that that conversion is not always easy. And also, customers end up then having two different configurators, two sources of truth, and that introduces some risk in the systems. The other use case that we have here is visualization. Right? Some of our customers want to allow their reps to offer a 3D visualization of a configuration I'll give you an example. If tomorrow you go to Home Depot and want to configure a shed for your backyard, well, chances are that you would like to see a visualization of how this shed is going to look like in your backyard before you make a buying decision. Some other examples, right? Customers want to have some custom selectors. They want to do some drag and drops in the UI to easily select options. Right? All of those things are not supported today out of the box in Salesforce CPQ. However, we can use a concept that we have introduced that is called the external configurator. And what it is, it's a plugin framework that allows our customers as well as partners to develop a custom configurator that will be embedded into the Salesforce CPQ experience. The value of that is that the custom configurator is only used for configuring the complex product or the complex service, and the output of that process is a list of line items that we can then include in the Salesforce CPQ quote in order to continue the Salesforce CPQ process just as if those line items were created with the standard Salesforce CPQ configurator. The external plugin leverages a technology that is called EasyXDM that allows for cross-domain integration, and that allows the external configurator to actually create those line items in real time in Salesforce CPQ and make it so as if those line items originated from the Salesforce CPQ configurator. We allow as well for mix and match. So that means that, for example, a customer that might be selling complex pieces of machinery like this one here, they might need an external configurator to configure the excavator or the crane, but they might just need standard CPQ to configure warranty services or configure implements for that piece of machinery, for example. So that means that we can mix and match and use the custom configurator only when it is needed. So if you want to implement an external configurator, there are several options. The first option in the middle here is connect with some ISV partners. We have ISV partners such as KBMax and NO6, for example, that offer on the App Exchange custom configurators. So KBMax, for example, is a custom configurator that's integrated with Salesforce CPQ, and that allows our manufacturing customers to handle very complex configurations with complex roles, and also allows for the generation of manufacturing data, engineering data, CAD automation, 3D visualization, all of that embedded within the Salesforce CPQ experience. The other alternative is that you can use you can develop your own configurator. You can use the platform components like Visualforce pages, Lightning components, Aura, Lightning web components, and develop your own configurator to address your own specific needs on top of Salesforce CPQ. And to that extent, you can also use Heroku in order to create your own, again, configurator with all the flexibility that the Heroku platform can offer. With that, now I think the best thing to do is to show you some examples. So Samuel is going to run through a demo today, and we'll show you both the end-user experience and also give you a look behind the scene and show you how this is set up actually in Salesforce CPQ.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. So to set the stage for our demo, we're going to be a mock delivery company that needs to map out all of our delivery points to build out our quote. So to do that, we're going to utilize an external configurator that loads up a map component where we can drop pins on a map and calculate the delivery segments and charges based off of that. So from a new quote, I'm going to go in and add some products. We have a single product, which is our delivery product. Once I select this, we're going to load into our configuration experience. So we have our external configurator loaded there. We're centered on San Francisco, and we can see that we have our external configuration JSON being received from the system. So this is a pretty complex object. There's the product, so this is the product that we selected. We have keys for configuration attribute or other configuration data that we want to store. We have this line item ID, which will reference the quote line once we create that in the quote line editor. And then most importantly, we have our option configurations. So this is where we have all of the features on this product and then an array of all of the product options. So we'll add our options there. So in this map, when I drop a point, we're logging to the console the latitude and longitude of that point. So as I zoom out and add some more points around San Francisco, zoom down and wait for my map to load. For each set of points, we're going to have a delivery segment, and that'll be a new product option in that delivery options feature. So we've got 1, 2, 3 segments there. So when I hit save, it'll automatically create those delivery options here, and the quantity is the distance in kilometers between each of those points. We can also see that we got the RPC received message, so that's Salesforce CPQ acknowledging that it received the configuration data. And now we can see that on our product, in the delivery options feature, we have our 3 option IDs there. Once we save this, we'll enter the quote line editor here. Another important thing to note, too, is I had a feature that required at least 1 option. So you can add on to option constraints and other product rules with the external configurator. It doesn't have to totally replace that. So now that we're on the quote line editor, we have our 3 quote lines for each delivery charge. We can do standard Salesforce discounting on top of that if we wanted to. And once we save this quote, we can also see that we passed additional data from configuration down to the quote lines and then into our quote line fields that store our start latitude, start longitude, and end latitude and longitude for each pair of points. So this is another way that you can use an external configurator if you have either an attribute-heavy based pricing model or need to just store additional data on your product options as you create them. So this way, it's accessible for downstream systems to track where our start and stop points for each of our delivery segments are. So that is very quickly the high-level demo. Now let's see how we set that up. So in products, I have 2 products. I have my delivery bundle, and then I have my 1 delivery charge. So on my delivery product, I've got 3 CPQ fields filled out. So I have configuration type required, so we launch into the configuration always, so that it'll always pop up the external configurator, and then the externally configurable checkbox that Erwan mentioned earlier that lets Salesforce CPQ know to launch that external configurator and use that instead of standard configuration by default. Next, we'll need to add our external configurator in package settings. So in the installed packages, we'll find our Salesforce CPQ package and configure that, where we can add any web address for our external configurator. So in the additional settings tab, there's this external configurator URL. And this, for the demo, is just a Visualforce page that is hosted in the same Salesforce org. But as Erwan mentioned, this could be either an external Heroku app, more Lightning Components, or hosted in the org itself. So that's it for the Salesforce org setup. Let's jump into the code and how we built it. So behind the scenes, it's really just a single Visualforce page. We're going to load in our EasyXDM resource. So that was the library to communicate back and forth between Salesforce CPQ and our external configurator. I'm also using the Leaflet.js open source mapping library. So I've loaded that as a static resource, and I'm just importing it there, and then loading in the Apex SLDS style sheets. Then inside, we've got 1 SLDS card with the header there. We have our 2 buttons to reset the markers and then to also save our configuration data back. Inside the card body, there's a div with the ID of map. That lets us host our leaflet map there, and then we've got some style properties set as well. In the Visualforce page, we have a JavaScript script. So we're initializing a couple of variables that we're going to use throughout. We have 2 empty arrays. So we have our map markers array and our option array. So one to store the map markers when we click on the map, one to store our options as we create those. I've got the option ID here hard-coded. If you do have options, they will come back in that initial configuration. So you can read those in. You can query your Salesforce org for other dynamic options that you may want to add. And then I also have a configuration object that we'll work with later. Next, I'm setting up the EasyXDM configuration. to Salesforce CPQ. So I'm using the EasyXDM remote procedure call. So there's two methods that are defined. There's the remote method, which is what Salesforce CPQ handles. That's what we saw when we had the RPC post message after we saved the configuration. And then we have the local post message function, which takes in the configuration data, and then we're going to parse that into our configuration object so it can work with it later, and then we log that to the console there. So that's our connection between Salesforce CPQ and our external configurator. Next, we're going through and initializing the leaflet map, setting it to San Francisco, loading in the OpenStreetMap tiles. The important part for the map here was adding the on-click event listener, where for each time we click on the map, we're going to create a new marker at the latitude and longitude, add it to the map, we'll log it to the console, and then add the map marker to our map markers array so that we can use that to generate our options later. The broadcast function is what we run when we hit the save button here. And it's going to loop through all of our map markers array, get the start and the end point, and generate an option for each of those segments there. Once we get all of those options, we're going to set in our config object that product property, the options configurations, and then access our delivery options feature and set our options array there. Finally, we use the remote procedure call to post the JSON stringified configuration object back into Salesforce CPQ. That creates the options inside of Salesforce CPQ with all the data that we passed over. So the standalone create options function here takes in a start point and an end point, both of which have a latitude and longitude. I have a simple get distance from the latitude and longitude in kilometers function. So that's using the Haversine formula, just calculating the great circle distance between any two pairs of latitude and longitude points. So that distance is going to be our quantity for the product options. So we don't need to worry about sales reps manually entering in addresses and trying to figure that distance between those two out. We'll calculate it automatically in configuration. When we're creating the new option, this is what the option data looks like. So a couple of key fields here. The option ID, so that lets Salesforce CPQ know what product we're going to be using. The quantity, in this case it's our distance, could also be any other, either calculated or standalone value. Whether or not it's selected, the product name. Index is the order that it appears in. There's a read-only key, and this is where quote line data gets stored after we save to the quote line editor. If you go back and reconfigure that bundle, the data will show up there. And then finally, the most interesting thing is the configuration data. So this is where we can add different Salesforce fields in here and assign values to them to save those to our product option and then carry those over into our quote lines. Finally, we'll just add it to our option array there, as you saw. And that's really it for creating options dynamically based off of our points that we have in our map. So we have some additional resources. We've got the Salesforce developer documentation. So if you want to learn more and start exploring yourself, the Salesforce CPQ external configurator documentation is a great place to start. Also, the EasyXDM library, so that's the open source library used to communicate between Salesforce CPQ and the external configurator. Leaflet.js, that's the open source library we used for mapping. And then finally, all of this code will be available in a GitHub repository here. It's got the map external configurator example. I also have an example using a Visualforce page, Lightning out, and a couple of Lightning components to put together a basic configurator. So if anybody wants to play around with that, feel free. And then also 2 sample configuration JSONs just to see what the data structure looks like. So with that, turn it back over to Erwan.
All right, thank you, Sam. Great demo, great code, very clean, great explanations. Thank you, everyone. Keep in mind what you saw in the demo is this is an example, right, of what you can do with the external configurator. Your imagination is the limit. There are countless things that you can do as well, different things, right? You saw here Sam pick on a map and this create options behind the scene. But you could have other examples where you could be configuring something complex and have a 3D rendering of a configuration, do drag and drops, do all sorts of things. So really, again, your imagination is the limit here. I hope you found this helpful, informative, and I hope that helps you better understand what are some of the capabilities that we have with the external configurator and how you can extend the out-of-the-box capabilities with Salesforce CPQ. So thank you so much.
Thank you.